There's a particular kind of pain that comes when the people you've loved most in this world look at you like you're something they'd rather forget. It's not the sharp sting of a stranger's cruelty or the dull ache of life's disappointments. No, this pain settles deep in your bones, in that sacred place where a mother's love lives, and it whispers the cruelest truth of all, that sometimes sacrifice isn't honored, it's despised. I never imagined I'd be sitting here at 62, telling strangers about how my own children tried to erase me from their lives, only to come running back when their comfortable world started crumbling. But here I am, and if you stay with me until the end, you'll understand why sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is let their children face the consequences of their choices. My name is Cordelia Whitmore, though for 35 years I answered to Mrs. Thornton Whitmore. Until 3 years ago, I was just another cleaning woman in Chicago, invisible to most people, especially my own family. I've spent decades scrubbing floors in million-dollar condominiums along Lakeshore Drive, polishing marble countertops in Gold Coast penthouses, and dusting antiques in Lincoln Park mansions worth more than I could earn in 20 lifetimes. The irony wasn't lost on me that I cleaned the homes of people who lived the life I once had, people who moved in the same circles where I used to belong. But none of that professional humiliation ever cut as deep as the shame I saw in my children's eyes when they looked at their mother, the cleaning lady. My ex-husband, Thornton, left me 18 years ago for his 26-year-old paralegal. Such a cliche, isn't it? He was a successful attorney with a prestigious firm downtown, all mahogany offices and floor-to-ceiling law books. I met him when I was 21, waitressing at an upscale restaurant near his office. He was my escape from double shifts and community college classes, my ticket to a better life. We married within 8 months. I thought I'd won the lottery. Our son Lysander was born the following year, and our daughter Octavia arrived 2 years later. For nearly 2 decades, I played the role perfectly, the devoted wife, the dedicated mother, the gracious hostess for Thornton's colleagues and clients. I organized charity fundraisers, volunteered at the children's schools, and ensured our Winnetka home ran like a well-oiled machine. I put my nursing school dreams on hold, then eventually abandoned them entirely. I became Mrs. Thornton Whitmore, and for a long time, I was content with that identity. Perhaps that was my first mistake, losing myself so completely in other people's expectations. When Thornton announced he was leaving, he took everything with him: the house, our savings, the comfortable lifestyle I'd helped build. All of it vanished with a signature on divorce papers. His attorney was ruthless, far more skilled than the overworked public defender I could afford. The settlement was devastating. Child support barely covered groceries, and the alimony was insulting. Suddenly, at 44, I found myself with no recent work experience, no completed degree, and 2 teenagers who blamed me for their father's departure. Maybe if you'd taken better care of yourself, Dad wouldn't have found someone else, Octavia said during one particularly brutal argument when she was 16. I weighed the same as I had on my wedding day, but Thornton had convinced both children that I'd somehow failed as a wife, that I'd driven him away. Cleaning houses became my lifeline, the only work I could find that paid enough to keep us in the school district. I started with an agency, then gradually built my own client list. For 18 years, I've scrubbed the toilets of Chicago's elite, including some of the same women who used to invite me to their book clubs and charity luncheons when I was Mrs. Thornton Whitmore. The transformation was jarring. Former friends who once sought my advice on interior decorating now left me detailed lists of cleaning instructions. Women who used to kiss my cheek at society Functions now barely acknowledged my presence as I vacuumed their Persian rugs. Lysander and Octavia grew up and moved away, Lysander to a tech company in Seattle after graduating from Northwestern. Octavia to a marketing firm in Denver after finishing at DePaul. Both married, well-educated professionals. Both visit maybe twice a year. Both call only when they need something or feel obligated by guilt. I live now in a modest one-bedroom apartment in Rogers Park, furnished with pieces I've collected from estate sales and secondhand shops. It's clean and comfortable, with a small balcony where I grow tomatoes and read library books. It's not much by my children's standards, but it's mine, earned with my own hands and honest work. At 62, I thought I'd made peace with my diminished place in my children's lives. I understood that I embarrassed them, the mother who cleaned other people's homes, while their father lived in luxury with his new wife. I accepted the brief, dutiful phone calls and the canceled holiday visits. I convinced myself that their success was worth my sacrifice, that their happiness mattered more than my dignity. Then came Lysander's text message last month. Not a phone call, mind you, but a text. Mom, having a dinner party for my 35th birthday next Saturday. Can you make it 7 p.m.? Dress as business casual. I stared at that message for 20 minutes, reading it over and over. Lysander hadn't invited me to anything in years. His birthday celebrations usually involved expensive trips to Aspen or the Bahamas with his wife Persephone and their affluent friends' destinations far beyond my budget. I always sent a card with whatever money I could spare tucked inside. He never acknowledged receiving them. The address he provided was in Lincoln Park, one of Chicago's most exclusive neighborhoods. Lysander and Persephone had recently purchased a renovated Victorian mansion, something I'd only seen in carefully curated Instagram posts, the kind of home I might have cleaned but never lived in. I spent the week agonizing over what to wear, what to bring, how to act around people who measured worth in stock portfolios and vacation properties. I finally settled on a navy blue dress I'd worn to a client's funeral, the nicest thing in my closet. I splurged on a professional haircut and manicure, luxuries I usually couldn't justify, for his gift. I chose a vintage silver picture frame containing a photo from his 8th birthday party in our old backyard, Lysander, grinning widely as he opened presents, surrounded by friends and cake and pure childhood joy. It was one of my most treasured memories, back when I was still the center of his world. Saturday evening arrived with an unseasonably warm breeze off Lake Michigan. I took the L as far as I could, then splurged on a taxi for the final stretch. The driver glanced at me in his rearview mirror as we navigated through the tree-lined streets of Lincoln Park. Nice neighborhood, he commented. Special occasion. My son's birthday today, I replied, unable to keep the pride from my voice despite everything. He lives here. The house was even more impressive in person. 3 stories of pristine brick and gleaming windows, with a small but perfectly manicured garden. Cars lined the street, BMWs, Mercedes, a Tesla. I clutched my purse and gift bag as I approached the front door, feeling like an imposter in my discount dress and drugstore jewelry. Lysander answered before I could knock, looking handsome and successful in his tailored charcoal suit. So much like his father. It made my chest tighten. Mom, he said, his tone carefully neutral. You made it. I stepped forward for a hug, but he moved aside, gesturing me into the foyer. Everyone's in the living room. Come on, I'll introduce you. Everyone, I asked, suddenly feeling underdressed and unprepared. Just some colleagues and friends. Persephone's parents are here too. Oh, and Dad and Venetia. My heart sank. Thornton and his wife of 15 years. I hadn't seen them since Octavia's wedding, where they'd been seated at the head table while I was relegated to a corner table with distant relatives. "That's nice," I managed. "I didn't realize they'd be here." Lysander shrugged. "Dad helped with the down payment. Persephone thought it would be good to have everyone together." Of course he had. Thornton had always been generous with the children, buying their affection with expensive gifts and opportunities while I struggled to pay rent. In their eyes, he was the successful provider, while I was simply there, a constant reminder of a life they'd rather forget. I followed Lysander through his magnificent home, past sleek modern furniture that probably cost more than my car, past abstract paintings hanging on walls that soared 15 feet high. Every step reminded me of the distance between us, not just the physical space of his mansion, but the emotional chasm that had grown wider with each passing year. We stepped into a spacious living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a private garden. About 20 people mingled with crystal wine glasses in hand, their conversations a low hum of professional accomplishments and vacation plans. I recognized Thornton immediately, still handsome at 65, his silver hair lending him an air of distinguished authority rather than age. Beside him stood Venetia, his wife of 15 years, blonde and elegant in a crimson dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Persephone, Lysander's wife, noticed me first and approached with a smile that didn't quite reach her perfectly made-up eyes. "Cordelia, what a surprise to see you here," she said, air-kissing my cheek with practiced politeness. A surprise I felt my stomach drop. Had Lysander not told them I was coming? "Hello, Persephone," I managed. "Happy birthday to Lysander." I extended the gift bag containing the silver frame, but Lysander barely glanced at it before setting it aside on a marble side table. "Thanks, Mom," he said distractedly, his eyes already scanning the room. "Let me get you something to drink." And he disappeared toward what I assumed was the kitchen, leaving me standing awkwardly beside Persephone, who was now looking around as if searching for an escape route. The silence stretched uncomfortably until I finally spoke. "Is Octavia coming tonight?" I asked, hoping to see my daughter after months of canceled lunch dates. Persephone's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Oh, she and Cassius are in Milan this week for Fashion Week. Something about her company's European expansion." She said it casually, but I caught the subtle emphasis on Milan. Fashion Week, European expansion, all the glamorous details of a life I could never afford. "That's wonderful for her," I said, though my heart stung with the familiar pain of exclusion. Octavia hadn't mentioned any trip to Milan when she'd called to cancel our last lunch date, claiming a sudden work emergency. An uncomfortable silence fell between us. I searched desperately for something to say, anything to bridge the growing awkwardness. "The house is absolutely beautiful. Persephone, you must be so proud of what you and Lysander have accomplished." "It's a solid investment," a familiar voice interjected from behind me. I turned to find Thornton approaching, Venetia gliding beside him like a swan. Property values in Lincoln Park have been climbing steadily. I've been telling him to buy in this neighborhood for years, and my ex-husband looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain, taking in my department store dress and modest jewelry. "Cordelia," he said with forced civility, "you're looking, well?" "Hello, Thornton," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "You look well, too." Venetia appeared at his side, wrapping her manicured hand possessively around his arm. "Cordelia, darling," she said in that syrupy tone that wealthy women use when they're being condescending. "How's the cleaning business still working with that agency downtown? Before I could answer, Lysander returned with a glass of white wine that looked expensive enough to feed me for a week. "Here you go, Mom," he said, pressing the glass into my hands. "Thank you," I said, taking a careful sip to hide my discomfort. The wine was indeed expensive, crisp, and clean with notes I couldn't even identify. "So, Cordelia," Venetia continued, clearly not finished with her interrogation, "Thornton was just telling us about the new vacation home we're considering in the Hamptons. Do you ever get out to the East Coast?" The question was innocent enough on the surface, but the subtext was clear. "Do you ever travel anywhere nicer than the bus route to your cleaning jobs?" I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but before I could formulate a response, a group of young men approached our circle. Lysander, one of them, called out, a tall man with perfectly styled hair and an expensive watch that caught the light. "You've got to settle a debate for us about the new Tesla models." I watched as my son's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm, more animation than he'd shown since I'd arrived. "Mom," he said, turning to me with what felt like an afterthought, "I'd like you to meet some of my colleagues from the firm." The introductions were awkward, a series of firm handshakes and polite smiles that didn't reach anyone's eyes. I could see them trying to place me in their world of corporate hierarchies and social connections. Their confusion evident when they realized I didn't fit anywhere in their carefully ordered universe. "So you're Lysander's mother," said the one with the expensive watch, Brandon. I think he'd said, "He's told us quite a bit about you." "Has he?" I asked, genuinely surprised. Lysander shifted uncomfortably beside me. "All about your cleaning business." Another colleague chimed in, a younger man with perfectly straight teeth and the confidence of someone who'd never known financial insecurity. "Very entrepreneurial of you." The word entrepreneurial hung in the air like a polite lie. I could see in their faces that they viewed my work as anything but entrepreneurial. It was simply what people did when they had no other options. "What's it like?" the first colleague asked, his tone suggesting he thought he was being graciously interested. "Working for all those wealthy families. You must see some fascinating homes." I felt Lysander tense beside me, his jaw tightening in a way that reminded me painfully of his father. "Actually," I began, finding my voice, "I've built a reputation for excellence over 18 years. Many of my clients are quite prominent judges, CEOs, even a few celebrities. I've probably been inside more influential homes than most people in this room." It wasn't entirely true, but I wasn't about to let these young men diminish me further. Lysander's expression darkened, and I could see the warning in his eyes. "Mom," he said, his voice carrying a sharp edge, "don't exaggerate." The words hit me like a physical blow. My own son correcting me in front of his colleagues, ensuring they knew not to believe whatever dignity I might claim for myself. "I'm not exaggerating," I replied quietly, trying to maintain my composure. "I've worked very hard to build my client base and maintain professional relationships. Mom cleans houses because she never finished college," Lysander said, his voice low but clear enough for everyone to hear. "She doesn't really have many other options." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt as though he had slapped me across the face in front of everyone. His colleagues looked uncomfortable, suddenly finding their wine glasses fascinating. Persephone had materialized beside us, her face a mask of embarrassment. I stared at my son, this man in his expensive suit, who had my chin in his father's calculating eyes, and felt something fundamental break inside me. Not my heart, exactly, but something deeper. The last thread of illusion that had kept me believing I still mattered to my children. "I clean houses," I said carefully, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, "because when your father left us with nothing, I had to find a way to support you and your sister. I clean because it allowed me to be present when you needed me, to attend your school events, to put food on the table and keep you in good schools. Lysander's face flushed red, his eyes darting nervously around the group. "Can we not do this here?" he hissed. "It's my birthday party." "Jim, yes, it is your birthday," I agreed, my voice growing stronger. "And I felt unwelcome from the moment I walked through your door." "That's not true," he protested, but his eyes continued to dart around, checking to see who might be listening to our exchange. "When was the last time you invited me to anything? Lysander, when was the last time you or Octavia called just to ask how I was doing?" My voice was rising slightly, despite my efforts to remain calm. "We're busy, Mom. We have careers, responsibilities. And I interrupted. "I work 6 days a week. I have clients who depend on me, responsibilities of my own." "It's different," he said quickly, glancing again at his colleagues who were now openly staring. "How is it different?" I challenged. He hesitated, and in that moment of hesitation, I saw the truth he'd been hiding behind polite distance and canceled visits. Then the words tumbled out, loud enough for half the party to hear. "You're just ordinary. Mom, you clean other people's houses for a living. Dad's new wife just bought a gallery space in River North. She's opening her own art exhibition next month." There it was, the truth I'd always known, but had never heard spoken aloud. I was ordinary. I was an embarrassment. I was less than worthy of their love or respect. I looked at my son, this stranger in expensive clothes who shared my DNA, but none of my values, and felt the last of my maternal illusions crumble. The conversations around us had quieted, people pretending not to listen while hanging on every word of our family drama. For a moment, I stood there in that beautiful living room, surrounded by crystal and marble and people who measured human worth in stock portfolios and zip codes. I thought about all the years I'd sacrificed for these children, all the dreams I'd abandoned, all the dignity I'd surrendered in the name of motherly love. Then I smiled, not with happiness, but with the terrible clarity that comes when you finally see the truth. I said nothing more. I simply picked up my purse from where I'd set it on the marble table and walked toward the front door. I passed Thornton and Venetia, deep in animated conversation with another couple about their upcoming European cruise. I passed Persephone's parents, holding court near the fireplace with stories of their daughter's success. I passed the young colleagues who were now whispering among themselves, probably about the crazy cleaning lady who'd just caused a scene. No one tried to stop me. No one even seemed to notice I was leaving. I called a rideshare from the sidewalk outside Lysander's front gate, my hands surprisingly steady as I typed my Rogers Park address into the app. As I waited, I looked back at the Victorian mansion with its warm lights spilling from every window, at the perfect life my son had built without me in it. My phone buzzed with a text as the car pulled up. "Lysander, Mom, where did you go? People are asking about you." A lie, of course. No one had been asking about me. I turned off my phone without responding and climbed into the back seat, giving the driver my address. "Nice party," he asked, making conversation as we wound our way through the tree-lined streets. "Enlightening," I replied, and said nothing more for the rest of the ride home. Back in my small apartment, I kicked off my good shoes and poured myself a glass of the wine I kept for special occasions, not the expensive vintage from Lysander's party, but honest wine from a bottle that cost $12 and tasted like hope. I sat on my tiny balcony among my tomato plants, looking out at the distant lights of Chicago. My city, too, just viewed from a different angle. I thought about Lysander's words ordinary, as if it were a sin to live a simple life, to work with your hands, to find meaning in honest labor rather than stock options and social status. And then I thought about what my children didn't know, the secret I'd kept for 18 years, ever since Thornton had walked out of our marriage with everything but his conscience. I turned my phone back on to find 27 missed calls from Lysander and a handful from unknown numbers. There were also 3 texts from Octavia, who must have heard something had happened at the party. I ignored them all and made a different call instead, to a number I'd memorized but never used. "Mr. Ashworth," I said when a gruff voice answered. "This is Cordelia Whitmore. I think it's time we had that conversation you've been wanting to have for all these years." I hung up and looked out at the city lights again, feeling something I hadn't experienced in decades, the intoxicating power of choice. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. And sometimes, after 18 years of protecting people who don't deserve protection, it's time to let the truth ring out loud and clear. The elevator in the merchandise mart rose smoothly to the 42nd floor, carrying me toward a meeting I'd avoided for 18 years. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Chicago sprawled beneath me like a glittering tapestry of ambition and broken dreams. I'd cleaned penthouses with views like this, but I'd never sat across from someone like Augustus Ashworth as anything approaching an equal. The law offices of Ashworth and Associates smelled of leather and old money. I sat in a chair that probably cost more than everything in my apartment combined, my hands folded carefully in my lap to hide their trembling. Across from me, Augustus Ashworth studied me with sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades in courtrooms. "I must admit, I was surprised to receive your call after our previous conversations over the years. I'd assumed you'd made your final decision." I had," I replied, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "But circumstances change people's perspectives." Augustus Ashworth was Thornton's former law partner. They'd built Whitmore and Ashworth together during the early years of my marriage, back when I still believed in happy endings and thought love conquered all. When Thornton left me 18 years ago, Ashworth had reached out quietly, discreetly. He'd had a proposition, one that I'd rejected immediately and continued to reject each time he'd approached me over the years. Until now. "May I ask what changed your mind?" Ashworth was in his early 70s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed like a hawk. I'd met him countless times at firm functions when I was still Mrs. Thornton Whitmore. Back then, he'd treated me with the polite deference due a partner's wife. Now, he watched me with undisguised curiosity and something that might have been respect. "My children," I said simply, and the words carried the weight of years of accumulated disappointment. He nodded as if he understood completely. Perhaps he did. "I've kept everything in perfect order, he said, opening a mahogany drawer and removing a thick manila folder. "The documentation is all here, just as I promised." As I explained in our previous discussions, Thornton never knew about my discovery of the offshore accounts. The money he funneled through them during your marriage is still there, growing with compound interest. He paused, studying my face carefully. "And with the statute of limitations expired on the initial tax fraud, the only person who can touch that money now is you." I took the folder but didn't open it immediately. I knew what was inside proof that my ex-husband had embezzled millions from his clients and hidden it in carefully constructed offshore accounts. Proof that had been in Ashworth's possession all these years. Proof that Thornton had sacrificed me to protect. "Remind me why you're doing this," I said, genuinely curious despite our previous conversations. "Why did you want me to have this information? What's in it for you after all these years?" Ashworth's smile was tight, predatory. "Thornton sacrificed me too, Cordelia. When the state bar started investigating irregularities in our client accounts, he made sure all roads led to my door. I lost my license, my reputation, everything I'd spent 30 years building. I had to rebuild from scratch while he walked away clean with nothing more than a slap on the wrist and a minimal fine. I remembered those dark months when the law firm had collapsed. The scandal had been front-page news in the legal community, but I'd been so focused on keeping my children fed and housed that I'd never understood the full implications. He threw me under the bus just like he threw you away, Ashworth continued, his voice carrying 18 years of carefully controlled anger. But I had resources, family money, connections. I was able to rebuild my practice, though it took years. You, on the other hand, were left with nothing. But you recovered, Isu, I observed, gesturing to the opulent office around us. I had other advantages, he acknowledged, but I never forgot what he did to either of us. And when I discovered these accounts 3 years after our firm's collapse, I knew exactly what had happened. I finally opened the folder, my hands surprisingly steady. The documents inside were overwhelming account numbers, transaction histories, company registration papers for shell corporations with names like Meridian Holdings and Pacific Vista Investments. But the bottom line was crystal clear. Thornton had hidden away just over $8.5 million, money stolen from clients who'd trusted him with their life savings, money that should have been disclosed during our divorce proceedings, money he'd kept secret while I scrubbed toilets to pay rent. You came to me, I said, remembering his first approach years ago. Because I was his wife when he set up these accounts. Exactly. Half of that money is legally yours under Illinois marital property law, regardless of how he obtained it. And turning him in now would destroy everything he's built since then, his new practice, his reputation, his marriage to Venetia. I studied the bank statements, tracing the deposits with my finger, the earliest dated back to the year before Thornton left me. The most recent was from just 6 months ago. He was still using the accounts, still hiding money from his current practice. And you're absolutely certain about the statute of limitations? I asked. On the original tax fraud, yes, that ship has sailed. The IRS can't touch him now. But the divorce fraud hiding assets during your settlement, that's a different matter entirely, especially in Illinois. The courts take a very dim view of spouses who conceal assets during divorce proceedings. Ashworth leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. And then there's the court of public opinion. His current clients wouldn't be happy to learn about his history with hidden accounts. The Illinois State Bar might take a renewed interest in his activities. Sometimes the legal consequences are less devastating than the professional and social ones. I closed the folder, feeling its weight in my hands. 18 years of proof, 18 years of injustice, 18 years of watching my children choose their father's wealth over their mother's love. Thank you for keeping this for me all these years, I said finally. Does this mean you're finally going to use it? His question was direct, loaded with anticipation. I stood up, clutching the folder to my chest like armor. I'm going to do what I should have done 18 years ago. My small apartment felt different when I returned from downtown. The furniture looked shabbier, the walls closer together, more temporary somehow. I'd lived here for 18 years, but suddenly it felt like a waiting room where I'd been sitting while my real life was on hold. I spread the documents across my small dining table, organizing them chronologically. The pattern was clear, systematic theft disguised as investment management. Client money disappeared into offshore accounts, never to return. The amounts were staggering. Mrs. Henderson's retirement fund, the Morrison family's college savings, elderly Mr. Kowalski's life insurance payout, all of it stolen, all of it hidden, all of it funding Thornton's new life while his victim struggled. My phone rang insistently, Lysander again. I let it go to voicemail, along with the 12 other calls from him since I'd left his party. Another ring brought Octavia's name to the screen. I turned the phone off entirely. My children had made their choices. Now I was making mine. I spent the night reading every document, memorizing account numbers and dates. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. First, I called in sick to all my cleaning jobs for the week, something I'd never done in 18 years of employment, and got to work. My first stop was the law offices of Chen, Martinez and Associates in the Loop. I'd researched them carefully online, a firm specializing in family law and financial fraud, with a reputation for taking on powerful opponents. I paid their consultation fee in cash and laid out Ashworth's documents on their conference table. Mrs. Whitmore, said Elena Martinez, the senior partner, after spending an hour reviewing the materials, you have an exceptionally strong case for divorce fraud. We can file motions to reopen the settlement immediately. With these offshore accounts now discovered, you could be entitled to half of those assets plus penalties and interest. And if I wanted to pursue other avenues as well, I asked carefully. Her eyebrow raised slightly. Such as, I want everything that's legally mine, I said firmly. But I also want Thornton to face consequences for what he did. Not just to me, but to his clients. The lawyer leaned back in her chair, studying me with a new interest. There are several approaches we could take. Legal remedies for the divorce fraud are one path. Reporting to the appropriate authorities is another. Public disclosure through the media is a third option. Each has advantages and disadvantages. I want all three, I said without hesitation. I want what's mine, and I want Thornton exposed for what he is. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. We can begin proceedings immediately. I should warn you, however, that this won't be quick or easy. Mr. Whitmore will fight back aggressively. It could get very ugly, and your children will inevitably be caught in the crossfire. I thought of Lysander's words, "You're just ordinary, Mom." I thought of Octavia's canceled lunches and convenient excuses. I thought of 18 years of being treated like the family embarrassment. I've been cleaning up other people's messes for 18 years, I replied. I'm not afraid of ugly. My next stop was a small cafe in Wicker Park, far from the legal district where someone might recognize me. The woman waiting for me there looked out of place among the hipsters and artists, with her crisp business suit and perfectly styled hair. Rebecca Torres was an investigative reporter for the Chicago Tribune, specializing in white-collar crime and political corruption. Ashworth had provided her name, mentioning that she'd been looking into Thornton years ago before the story was mysteriously killed. Mrs. Whitmore, she said, rising to shake my hand firmly. I've been hoping to meet you for a very long time. I slid a copy of the documentation across the small table to her. I believe you were working on a story about my ex-husband some years ago. Rebecca didn't touch the folder immediately, but her eyes locked onto it like a predator spotting prey. I was, until my editor told me to drop it. Apparently, Mr. Whitmore had some very influential friends in the mayor's office. He still does, I acknowledged, but perhaps not for much longer. She finally pulled the folder closer, opening it with the careful reverence of someone who understood the explosive nature of what she was handling. "Why now?" she asked, her eyes scanning the documents. "These accounts have existed for years. Ashworth tells me you've known about them for almost as long. Let's just say I recently realized that family loyalty isn't always reciprocated," I replied. Rebecca nodded, continuing to flip through the papers with growing excitement. "This is incredible stuff, Mrs. Whitmore. If I can verify it independently, and I will need to do that, this could be a major story. The amounts involved, the length of time, the offshore complexity. This could bring down more than just your ex-husband." "How long would that verification take?" "A few weeks at minimum. I need to trace these accounts, confirm the transactions, reach out to the victims for comment. I'll also need to contact Mr. Whitmore for his response before publication." "Will you tell him the information came from me?" "Eventually, yes, but not until we're ready to publish. The public has a right to know about this, Mrs. Whitmore. But you should understand, if this story breaks, it won't just affect your ex-husband, his current business, his reputation, his family. Everyone in his orbit will feel the impact." I thought of Venetia in her crimson dress, discussing vacation homes in the Hamptons. I thought of Lysander's glass mansion and Octavia's trips to Milan. I thought of the family photos that never included me. "I'm counting on it," I said, echoing Ashworth's predatory smile. As I walked back to the L station, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades, the intoxicating power of holding someone else's future in my hands. For 18 years, I'd been powerless, invisible, ordinary. Now I carried in my purse the means to bring justice not just for myself, but for every client Thornton had robbed, every person he'd betrayed. When I turned my phone back on that evening, I had 53 missed calls and over 80 text messages. Most were from Lysander and Octavia, growing increasingly frantic. The most recent messages suggested they were considering filing a missing person report if I didn't respond. I sent them each the same message: "I'm fine. I need some time alone. Please respect that." Then I turned my phone off again and went to bed. For the first time in 18 years, I slept without dreams of what might have been. Instead, I dreamed of what was about to come. The Chicago Tribune ran the story on a Sunday morning when the autumn air carried the first hint of winter. The headline stretched across the front page in bold black letters: "Prominent attorneys, hidden millions, fraud, divorce deception, and offshore accounts." Rebecca Torres's byline sat beneath it like a signature on a death warrant. Thornton's name dominated the first paragraph. Mine appeared in the third. Cordelia Whitmore, his ex-wife of 18 years, provided documentation showing that Thornton Whitmore hid over $8.5 million in offshore accounts during their divorce proceedings. Money allegedly stolen from client trust funds over a decade-long period. I sat at my small dining table with my morning coffee, reading every word with the careful attention of someone whose life had just irrevocably changed. Rebecca had done exceptional work. The article detailed not just the fraud during our divorce, but connected it to the earlier state bar investigation that had resulted in Augustus Ashworth taking the fall. She'd found former clients who'd suspected they'd been defrauded but couldn't prove it. She'd uncovered a pattern of financial manipulation spanning over 15 years. Mrs. Eleanor Morrison, now 83, was quoted extensively about her missing retirement fund. "I trusted him with everything, Ed," she said. "My husband worked 40 years at the steel mill to build that nest egg. Mr. Whitmore promised it would be safe, that he'd make it grow. Instead, he stole our golden years." The article included photographs Thornton in his expensive suits at charity galas, the Lincoln Park mansion he shared with Venetia, the vacation home in Door County. All purchased, Rebecca noted, during years when his reported income shouldn't have supported such luxuries. And then there was Thornton's quote, positioned perfectly to make him sound both guilty and pathetic. These allegations are completely baseless. My ex-wife is a disturbed woman seeking revenge for imagined slights. She's clearly been coached by someone with an agenda against me. I almost laughed at that. Imagined slights, as if 18 years of financial struggle while he lived in luxury was something I'd conjured in my head, as if watching my children choose his money over my love was a delusion. My phone had been ringing constantly since the article went live at 6 a.m. I'd let them all go to voicemail. Thornton's increasingly furious messages, Lysander's panicked calls, Octavia's tearful pleas. Even Venetia had called once, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. At exactly 10 a.m., my lawyer called. I answered on the first ring. Mrs. Whitmore, Elena Martinez said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. I assume you've seen the article. Every word, Bats, I replied. Mr. Whitmore's attorney contacted us at 8:30 this morning. They want to discuss an immediate settlement. I smiled to myself, watching the morning sun stream through my small kitchen window. Already, the article's only been online for 4 hours. Apparently, some of Mr. Whitmore's current clients have already called demanding explanations. His firm's phones have been ringing nonstop. The Illinois State Bar has also reached out to us, indicating they're reopening their investigation based on the new evidence. What are they offering? I asked, though I already knew it wouldn't be enough. $4 million, half of the documented offshore funds. They're claiming the rest was spent on legitimate business expenses over the years. Not acceptable, I said firmly. I want half of everything the documented funds, plus half the value of all assets acquired since our divorce. The Lincoln Park house, the vacation home in Door County, his stake in the new law firm, his investment portfolio, everything. There was a pause. That's an aggressive position. Mrs. Whitmore, we're talking about potentially $15 to $20 million in total assets. He stole 18 years of my life, I replied. I'm simply collecting compound interest on what's due. I'll convey your terms, but prepare yourself. This could turn into a very protracted legal battle. Mr. Whitmore has resources, and he'll use every trick in the book. Good, I said. I have time, and now I have resources too. Let him fight. After hanging up, I finally listened to my voicemails. Thornton's progression from anger to desperation was almost amusing. The first message, left at 6:47 a.m., was pure rage. Cordelia, what the hell do you think you're doing? That article is full of lies, and you know it. I'll sue you for defamation, for conspiracy, for everything I can think of. You've destroyed whatever reputation you had left. By the fourth message, recorded at 9:15 a.m., his tone had shifted. Look, Cordelia, we both know you're angry about something Lysander said. Kids say stupid things, but this affects everyone. Call me back so we can work this out like adults. Lysander's messages were different. His voice was tight, controlled, professional, the tone he probably used with difficult clients. Mom, my managing partner called me this morning. They're concerned about the publicity and how it might affect my position here. Do you understand what you've done? You've put my entire career at risk. Call me back immediately. Octavia's voicemails were tearful, desperate. Mom, Cassius's parents saw the article. They're asking if we should postpone announcing our engagement. His father's a federal judge. He can't have any association with financial scandal. Please, can't we talk about this? It's affecting everyone who loves you. Gate. I deleted them all without responding. Instead, I got dressed carefully, not in my cleaning uniform, but in the navy dress I'd worn to Lysander's party, accessorized now with a confidence I'd never possessed before. At noon, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I had a strong suspicion about who it might be. Thornton stood in my hallway, looking both furious and somehow diminished. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he'd aged overnight. The confident posture that had intimidated opposing counsel for decades was gone, replaced by the slumped shoulders of a man facing ruin. "Cordelia," he said, his voice carefully controlled, "we need to talk." "Do we?" I made no move to invite him in, enjoying the reversal of power. "What the hell do you think you're doing? That article is destroying my reputation, my business. I've already lost 3 major clients this morning." "Your reputation," I interrupted. "Your business. What about my life, Thornton? The one you stole when you hid those millions during our divorce?" His eyes narrowed. "You can't prove any of that." "The documentation speaks for itself," I said calmly. $8.5 million in offshore accounts. The Illinois State Bar seems quite interested in reviewing the evidence. The color drained from his face. "You wouldn't think about what this does to the kids?" "I am thinking about them," I replied. "I'm thinking about 18 years of watching them choose your money over my love. I'm thinking about Lysander calling me ordinary for working honest jobs. I'm thinking about all the times they've been ashamed of their mother who cleaned toilets so they could have opportunities." Thornton pushed past me into the apartment, his desperation overriding social niceties. I let him, curious to see what he would do when cornered. He stood in the center of my living room, looking around with the same contempt I'd seen in our children's eyes. "This is what this is about, isn't it?" he said, gesturing dismissively at my modest furniture. "You're jealous. You've spent 18 years scrubbing floors while Venetia and I built something real, while the kids succeeded despite your limitations. You're bitter and alone, and you want to drag everyone down with you." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, studying this man I'd once loved enough to sacrifice everything for. "Is that what you think? That I'm jealous? What else could it be? You've always been small-minded, Cordelia, always focused on the wrong things. That's why I left you, were suffocating me with your mediocrity. I left because Venetia was willing to look the other way when you committed fraud," I corrected him. "You left because staying married to me meant you'd have to share those millions you'd stolen." "I left because you had no vision," he snapped. "No ambition beyond being the perfect little housewife. Do you know what it's like being married to someone with no dreams, no goals beyond serving other people?" We stared at each other across the room, 18 years of unspoken truths hanging between us like smoke from a fire that had never quite died. "The kids called me," Thornton finally said, his voice taking on a calculating tone. "They're devastated. Lysander might lose his position at the firm. Octavia's engagement is in jeopardy. Is that what you wanted? To hurt your own children?" "Our children," I corrected, "made their choices long ago. They chose status over integrity, money over loyalty, your values over mine. So this is punishment for them too. This is consequences," I said. "Something you've spent your entire life avoiding." Thornton ran a hand through his silver hair, his courtroom composure finally cracking. "What do you want?" "Cordelia money. Name your price, and we can make this all disappear. I'll double whatever Ashworth is paying you to do this." I laughed, a sound sharp and cold in the quiet room. "My price, Thornton. You couldn't afford my price anymore." "Try me," he challenged. "I still have resources you can't imagine. Justice, I said simply. Complete and uncompromising justice, not just for me, but for Mrs. Morrison and all the other clients you robbed. For Augustus Ashworth, who took the fall for your crimes. For every person whose trust you violated. You'll destroy everything, he said, panic creeping into his voice. The kids' futures, their marriages, their careers. No, Thornton, you destroyed those things when you decided to become a thief. When you taught our children that money and status were more important than honesty and respect. I'm merely bringing the truth to light. He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. I don't recognize you anymore. Good, I replied. The woman you knew died the day Lysander called her ordinary for working honest work. The woman standing before you now isn't interested in your recognition, only in your reckoning. Thornton's phone rang. He glanced at it, his expression darkening further. This isn't over, he said, moving toward the door. You're absolutely right, I agreed. It's just beginning. And Thornton, the next time you want to discuss terms, you can speak to my attorney. I'm done being reasonable. After he left, I sat on my small balcony, watching the afternoon light fade over Chicago. The temperature was dropping, and I could smell winter in the air that clean, sharp scent that promised change was coming. My phone buzzed with yet another text from Octavia. Mom, please, we need to talk. Families shouldn't destroy each other like this. I typed back. We stopped being a family the day you decided I wasn't good enough to be part of it. Then I turned off my phone and poured myself a glass of wine, not the cheap stuff I usually bought, but a bottle I'd splurged on to celebrate my new life. I sat among my tomato plants, looking out at the city spread before me. Somewhere out there, Thornton was scrambling to save his reputation and his assets. Lysander was explaining to his partners why his mother had just destroyed his father in the Tribune. Octavia was wondering if her engagement would survive the scandal. Venetia was probably calling her lawyers, trying to protect her own interests. But here, in this moment, surrounded by the honest plants I'd grown with my own hands, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades, the profound satisfaction of knowing I'd finally stopped cleaning up other people's messes and started addressing my own. Justice was coming slow, methodical, and without mercy, just as it should be. For the first time in 18 years, I was no longer ordinary. I was powerful, and I was just getting started. 6 months after the Chicago Tribune story broke, the consequences rippled through every corner of Thornton's carefully constructed world like an earthquake that wouldn't stop shaking. The Illinois State Bar revoked his license permanently. 3 class action lawsuits from defrauded clients resulted in judgments totaling $12 million. His new law firm collapsed within weeks as partners fled and clients demanded their files. Lysander lost his position at the tech firm, not officially for the scandal, but his contract wasn't renewed when it came up for review. The managing partners couldn't risk the association with financial fraud, no matter how talented he was. Octavia's engagement to Cassius ended quietly, his federal judge father refusing to allow his son to marry into a family tainted by criminal activity. The Lincoln Park mansion went up for sale, along with the Door County vacation home. Venetia filed for divorce within 2 months, taking half of what remained after the legal settlements. She'd married money, not love, and when the money disappeared, so did she. As for me, the final divorce settlement awarded me $8.2 million, my rightful share of the stolen funds, plus accumulated interest. I bought a modest 2-bedroom house in Oak Park with a real garden where I could grow more than just tomatoes. I stopped cleaning other people's houses and started living in my own. The money felt strange at first, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. But it wasn't really about the money. It was about dignity restored, justice served, truth finally spoken after 18 years of silence. Lysander and Octavia both reached out eventually. Once the media attention died down, and they'd had time to process what their father had really done. The conversations were awkward, painful, full of apologies that came too late and explanations that didn't quite explain enough. We're trying to rebuild something, but it's different now. They see me differently, not as the ordinary cleaning lady, but as their mother who was strong enough to demand justice when justice was due. I think they finally understand that being ordinary was never my failing. Working with my hands, living simply, choosing integrity over wealth, these weren't signs of weakness. They were choices I made to survive with my soul intact. Sometimes at night, when I sit in my real garden with a book and a glass of wine, I think about that woman who stood silently in Lysander's mansion, absorbing his cruel words about being ordinary. She believed, even then, that love meant accepting disrespect, that being a good mother meant swallowing pain and never demanding better. I was wrong. Love without respect isn't love, it's enabling. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the full weight of their choices, even when those people are your own children. Dear friends, Cordelia's story isn't just about family betrayal or financial justice. It's about something much deeper that touches every one of our lives. How many of us have confused love with doormat behavior? How many times have we accepted disrespect in the name of keeping peace? The truth that Cordelia discovered at 62 is one we all need to hear. Real love sometimes requires the courage to say no more, whether it's family members who take us for granted, friends who only call when they need something, or anyone who treats our kindness as weakness. There comes a moment when staying silent becomes complicity in our own diminishment. Being ordinary, working honest jobs, living simply, choosing character over cash. These aren't failures. They're victories of the human spirit. But even the most humble among us deserves basic respect and dignity. Sometimes the people we love most need to lose us temporarily to remember our worth. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is step back and let them feel the consequences of treating us poorly. It's not about revenge. It's about teaching them that love is a two-way street paved with mutual respect. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family or undervalued by people who should cherish you most, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between keeping peace and demanding respect? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you believe everyone deserves to hear these truths about love, dignity, and self-worth, please subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. Together, we can remind each other that no one should have to choose between being loved and being respected. Remember, you are not ordinary, you are irreplaceable, and you deserve love that honors that truth.